Dependent o independent variables. Which is which, yan ang ating pag-uusapan dito sa ating matsayang talakayan. Kaya, stay tuned! Hello, grade 8 learners! Let us now talk about dependent and independent variables. At the end of this video, you will be able to determine dependent and independent variables. Ano nga ba ang dependent variable? So let's have the definition. It represents a quantity whose depends on those manipulators. Depends on the independent variable. These are the outputs to the function. And the variable y is dependent variable because it depends on the value of x. So anong ibig sabihin nito? Ang keyword na makikita natin is depends. While independent variable are the inputs to the function. This controls the dependent variable, and the variable x is the independent variable because any value could be assigned to it. Example number 1. Time and salary. Which do you think is the dependent and independent variables? Okay, you're right. Time is the independent variable and salary is the dependent variable. Why? Because salary always depends on how many hours you work. So, ibig sabihin, kung magkano ang tatanggapin mong sweldo, depende kung ilang oras ka nagtrabaho. Okay, so let's now complete the statement. I consider time as independent variable because it controls the salary. And I consider salary as dependent variable because it depends on the number of hours worked. Example number 2. The number of hours boiling and the number of ounces of water in the pot. Which do you think is the dependent and independent variable? Yes, you're right. Independent variable is the number of hours boiling. And dependent variable is the number of ounces of water in the pot. So kung mapapansin ninyo, pag nagpapakulo ka ng tubig, habang tumatagal ang pagpapakulo, so nababawasan yung dami ng tubig. Ibig sabihin, yung dami ng tubig sa pot ay depende kung gaano mo na katagal pinapakulo yung tubig. So, we can now have the statement, I consider the number of hours boiling as independent variable because it controls the number of ounces of water in the pot. And I consider the number of ounces in water in the pot as a dependent variable because it depends on the number of hours boiling. Next example. The distance covered and the volume of gasoline. Which do you think is the dependent or independent variable? Yes, you're right. Independent variable is the volume of gasoline. And dependent variable is the distance covered. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? Kung gaano kalayo ang matatravel mo will depend on the volume o kung gaano kadami yung gasolina ng sasakyan mo. So, we have the statement, I consider the volume of gasoline as an independent variable because it controls the distance covered. And I consider the distance covered as a dependent variable because it depends on the volume of gasoline. Next example, the number of hours studied to the grade on test. Which do you think is the dependent and independent variable? Yes, you're right. The number of hours studied is the independent variable and the grade on test is the dependent variable. So ano ang ibig sabihin nito? The more time that you spend in studying is mas malaki ang possibility that you are going to get a higher grade. Now, so let's have the statement. I consider the number of hours studied as an independent variable because it controls the grade on test. And I consider the grade on test as dependent variable because it depends on the number of hours studied. Next is height of a plant to the number of months grown. So independent, number of months grown, and dependent is the height of a plant. So ibig sabihin, kung gaano na kalaki yung plant, depende kung gaano na siya katanda. Yun lang ang ibig sabihin nun. Now, we have the statement, I consider the number of months grown as independent variable because it controls the height of a plant. And I consider the height of a plant as a dependent variable because it depends on the number of months grown. Dependent and independent variable in an equation where y is expressed in terms of x. So, this can be shown in a function notation. So, in a function notation, the variable x is considered the independent because any value could be assigned to it. Ibig sabihin, kahit na anong value ang i-assign natin sa variable x ay po pwede. It is allowed. However, the variable y is the dependent variable because it always depends on the value of x. So let's have the function notation. The f of x notation can also be used to define a function. If f is a function, the symbol f of x can be read as f of x. And it is used to denote the value of the function f at a given value of x. A function notation, f of x denotes the value of y or the y value. These are the elements of the range. These are the function f associates with the value or x value, which is the domain. So let's have our example. So express each statement using a function notation. How many liters of water are wasted when the faucet runs for 5 minutes? When we represent this as a function notation, this is simply saying the same as find f of 5. Another, find the value of y that corresponds to the value of x, which is 12. So, in function notation, this is the same as find f of 12. So you can use the symbol f of x in place of y. So we have the example, f of x is equal to 2x plus 5. Function notation allows us to see the input value. So let's say we have our input, x is equal to 1. Ang gagawin lang natin to find the output ay i-replace natin o isa-substitute natin yung 1 sa variable x. So, the result will be equivalent to 7, meaning that input x equals 1 is the independent variable and the output y, which is 7, is the dependent variable. Next example, y is equal to 2x minus 2. Our input, x is equal to 4. When we have y is equal to 2 times 4 minus 2, the value of y will be 8 minus 2, which is 6. So, in table form, the input is 4 and the output is 6, meaning that our input x equals 4 is the independent variable and the output y equals 6 is the dependent variable. Next is we have g of x is equal to x squared minus 2x plus 1. Our input, if x is equal to 1, replace 1 to the variable x. So we have g of 1 is equal to 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 1. So we have the result, the g of 1 is equal to 0. Our input, x is equal to 1, which is the independent variable, and the output y, which is equal to 0, will be the dependent variable. And now it's your turn. Get a paper or your notebook and a pen. Then, do this activity. You just have to classify the dependent and independent variable in each of the given. And that's for today, guys. Mag-practice at magtiyaga upang lalong maging magaling. Again, this is Teacher Dali na nagsasabing, practice makes perfect. Thanks for watching!